Good evening, fellow Bhilaians. We all share the same roots. I am actually currently a professor in IIT Delhi. I don't need this when I teach, but today, I just kept a few notes. So that, in the limited time that I have, if I had enough time, I didn't do this. So I am Sandeep Sen. As I said, I am a professor of computer science in IIT Delhi. I am a graduate of class 12 from Bhilai in 1980. 7-8 years after my esteemed colleagues. I was actually in the second batch of 10+2 and consequently suffered somewhat, not as much as the first batch who were practically without any textbooks. So living in Bhilai, we used to have this feeling about Delhi. Everything used to be decided in Delhi about the central board. And we used to always think that these people basically make a mess of things, or basically make design. Discovered as I grew up is what makes me different, among other things from many other people, is that the small town, large city, cultural divide, and that has stayed with me. That has stayed with me for many years. So anyway, going back to when I was in Bhilai and in school. So let's say I was in school mostly in the mid-70s in high school, again from Sector 10. That was the only school till then. I think 2 years down the line, Sector 4 had another English medium school. Of course, there are many other excellent Hindi medium schools in Bhilai. So the real discussion, that used to happen. So I was much more, interested in playing football and cricket rather than studying. Of course, I would also study, not that I wouldn't. But there's all these interesting discussions used to happen after the play was over. It was getting a little dark, and we'll be discussing many things. And among other things, that we were discussing are the so-called stars that are emerging, from our school and from Bhilai. And of course, Vijay Lakshmi was always mentioned. I was living only 3 streets away from her. She did not know that. And in fact, when I would talk to his brother, sometimes when she was visiting, he would say, no, actually, no, you can't disturb me, she will really scold me. We will be very wary of visiting her home at that point of time. So yeah, we'll be discussing these people who have done very well, and basically the visa to getting into the big world was doing very well. So I'm also one of those unfortunate, what should I say, people who turned out to be engineers. So I'm an engineer by training, but I don't think I'm an engineer any longer. Right? I never worked in the industry, so I don't consider myself to be a thoroughbred engineer. So anyway, so we used to be discussing about all these people who are doing very well in school, and especially around mid-70s is when I think the Bhilai students started making their mark in the national arena. So there are a couple of people who secured ranks in the merit list. People did extremely well in the entrance exams in IIT. By the way, IIT was not that well known even when I was in school. I mean, it was just getting there, but I myself was not very sure what these institutions were. At that point of time, I was far interested in considering physics or some science, pure science, as an option rather than engineering or computer science. In fact, computers hardly existed. Computer science didn't. So then, so there are these people who are making their marks, and I certainly recall at least one name, Shomya Sarkar. He created a real ripple by, I think, standing 3rd in the IT entrance exam. That I don't know which year it was, maybe 77 or 76. And then following one of my neighbors, his name is Bhaskar Buharai. Unfortunately, he's no more, by the way. He also did extremely well, and being very close to me. So that kind of changed my goals a little bit. So I thought maybe that's something worth studying for. So, and then I finally found myself in IIT Kharagpur. And then when I was in IIT Kharagpur, the first thing I noticed was that, of course, I didn't go to a big city. Like I didn't come to Delhi from Bhilai. I actually went down further probably. So in Kharagpur, there is nothing but the campus, and then there is a huge railway platform. And it's a completely rural area, which is somewhat similar to what we experienced in Bhilai. Because you go about 10 kilometers from Bhilai, you are in like red soil and absolute hinterland of the rural area. So Kharagpur reminded me a lot about Bhilai. It made me actually more nostalgic. And then I also realized that it looks like exactly one sector of Bhilai. Okay, so shrink Bhilai by a factor of 10, and that's what the campus for IIT Kharagpur is. It's pretty big. It's about 1,300 or 1,400 acres, and kind of from that moment I think I decided, look, I really didn't want to leave Bhilai, other than the fact that of course I didn't consider any of the institutions there worth studying. But then I would try to go back to some place which would remind me of Bhilai, and that's how I now find myself in IT campus. I decided that IT campus is a nice place which would is like a small scale Bhilai. Okay, so I never have to leave Bhilai that way. So it's be always with me, and that's what it has been with me. So I have actually never left IT campus while I have been in India. So after IIT Kharagpur, I went and did my master's and PhD from US. I also worked in Bell Labs. But in 1991, I was back in India, and I chose IIT Delhi over some other options, but mostly education institutions. So I have been here for more than 20 years now. And yesterday Abhijit came and told me, when you describe your journey, my space-time journey, what I should try to relate my experience about what made me, if there's anything special about Bhilai that made me what I am. So what I am today, I'm not sure whether I've really achieved what people would consider something worth achieving. Especially nowadays, I don't think the academic career is looked upon as something very respectable. But when we grew up, like Vijay Lakshmi said, we grew up in a completely different era. It's not because just it was Bhilai and this is Delhi. I think it was just 30, 40 years before. The thinking pattern was different. I would consider myself and all the Bhilaians to be, if I may use the term, children of Nehru actually, like midnight children. So it was basically Nehru's vision that we're living then, and that vision now itself is no longer considered, that lofty. If I may say, there are many questions raised about the economic model then and the economic model now, and in fact, yesterday night I was wondering, so I have not been in Bhilai for about 15 years now. So my parents left Bhilai in late 80s, and the reason for my father leaving Bhilai is also a little funny. Let me share that with you. So I was the only child, and when I left school in 1980, my mother was of course, very upset and very sad, but she didn't want to stop me. But at that point of time, because there was no real phone connection, the only method of communication were letters. Okay, so I would have to write 2 letters a week, so that she wouldn't come rushing to Kharagpur or something. And in fact, some of my friends living in the neighborhood, their parents would actually request me, so you are such a nice, responsible son. Please also write a couple of lines for my children who are not so responsible. So that's the way it was. The only means of communication were the letters. Okay, I couldn't even make a phone call between Kharagpur and Bhilai. Just think about it. That was already almost mid-80s, right? And then when I went off to US, then of course the letters slowed down further. So that news that my parents would be getting was like about 20 days late. And so there was this urge that my mother had that she has to speak with me somehow to find out what I'm like. And then they decided, look, my father took an early retirement to move over to Calcutta, because then they could actually call me on the phone and I could contact them on the phone. So this was the reason actually they left Bhilai, and I really wish they didn't, because I would have then had more opportunities of going back to Bhilai. So I guess basically the coming from is the differences that I have found between small town and large town, and I have seen, because I'm teaching in IIT, I have seen people, students from Bhilai also coming in and studying in IIT Delhi. And when I speak with them, I do find a lot of differences, that of course, there has to be generational gaps and so on and so forth. But the whole scenario has changed in a way that so there is a much, I think, more higher demand nowadays for soft skills as opposed to hard skills. I won't use the word engineering or medicine in the way that it was. I would say it's basically the hard skills versus soft skills. And the soft skills nowadays in the present world, I think they're much more valued than the hard skills. So ironically, I think the hard skills are easier to acquire, by which I mean that even maths and science is easier to acquire than actually the softer skills. The softer skills are actually harder to acquire. I don't know how many of you agree with that, but that's the way I feel. And growing up in Bhilai, actually we were challenged more with the hard skills because they were, as I said, somewhat easier to acquire. In batch in 10 plus 2, I was also second batch of computer science, right, from the whole of India. So there also we suffered somewhat. So anyway, so I think let me just glance if I'm missing out any interesting anecdotes that I may have jotted down. Um, I guess not. So, well, yeah. So one thing I certainly I'm nostalgic about is that in Bhilai, it was a Diwali almost every day if you had to visit the steel plant. So I took every opportunity of visiting the steel plant and the rolling mills and the blast furnaces because when you go there, you feel that there's something happening. There's this daily fireworks all around, right? And that would really light up my life. Right? So it was really an exciting, sort of.
Good evening. Even before I start to say anything, everything is well spoken about. Before I start, I would like to